Welcome to Becoming a Sleep Consultant. I'm your host, Jayne Havens, a certified sleep consultant and founder of both Snooze Fest by Jayne Havens and Center for Pediatric Sleep Management. On this podcast, I'll be discussing the business side of sleep consulting. You'll have an insider's view on launching, growing, and even scaling a sleep consulting business. This is not a podcast about sleep training. This is a podcast about business building and entrepreneurship. Suzie is the founder of Empowernting, a coaching company dedicated to empowering parents through compassionate guidance and practical resources that foster strong family connections. She believes in creating a supportive community where parents gain the awareness, knowledge, tools, and confidence to navigate the joys and challenges of parenthood, ultimately nurturing happy and thriving children. Suzie is a certified positive discipline parenting educator, certified child life specialist, and certified sleep consultant. She currently serves as a school counselor for children from infancy to 8th grade, where she coaches teachers, parents, and students. Suzie holds a master's degree in child life and school counseling. Her mission is to help parents feel confident in their parenting decisions, especially amidst the overwhelming flood of information parents face today. Suzie, welcome to the Becoming a Sleep Consultant podcast. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
I'm super excited. I've been preparing, so I hope we're going to be able to help some people.
Absolutely. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do professionally, and why did you decide to get certified to work as a sleep consultant?
So professionally, right now, I am a school counselor. I work at a private school where I support teachers and students and families. I'm constantly coaching adults on how to help children. I really wanted to broaden the people that I could help. And so I started a parenting coaching company. And I was realizing more and more, even like as a parent myself, I can have all the knowledge in the world. I can know exactly what I should be doing. But if I'm tired, I'm not doing any of it. And if I'm tired, I'm angry, I'm grouchy, I'm grumpy, and the whole household is that. And it never feels good. And from like a basic needs standpoint, I realized that it was so important for me to get a sleep consulting certificate so I can help parents from the basic needs standpoint. And then you can do the higher level, work.
Makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. I actually work a lot. I collaborate a lot with a therapist who supports moms who are struggling with postpartum anxiety and depression. And she refers a fair amount of business my way. And she always says to me that she actually can't do her job as a therapist until I do my job as a sleep consultant. So I think that sounds a lot like what you had going on, right? Like you couldn't properly coach these parents to make meaningful changes in their homes until everybody was getting a full night of sleep. When we were brainstorming ideas for this podcast episode, I think it was your idea to discuss the topic of thinking traps. And I'm actually really excited for this conversation because I don't really know if I know a lot about thinking traps. So tell us, what are thinking traps? What is that?
Yeah. So you probably know more than you think you do. I think if you have awareness of your thoughts, if you're able to kind of like take a step back and be aware of your thoughts, then you know what I'm going to talk about. And really, thinking traps are conclusions that our minds make because there's so much information that we need to synthesize and make sense of on a daily basis that our brains will just kind of like take shortcuts because it's too much information. So let's make a shortcut. And oftentimes those shortcuts are helpful, right? Like, let's say, if you're walking down a dark alley and, there's a big human walking towards you in a trench coat and a hat and sunglasses and it's nighttime, you might walk away, right? Like our brains kind of help us oftentimes when they come up with conclusions. But sometimes the conclusions they come up with are not helpful and they're not actually effective and they don't help us to reach our goal, or they impede on our relationships with ourselves or with other people. And so if we can catch those traps, then we can help us to further our goals.
Okay. And so when I think about these thinking traps as an entrepreneur, and actually we have a Facebook group for students and grads, our Center for Pediatric Sleep Management Facebook group. Actually, I think somebody posted, it was either yesterday or today, I think her own thinking trap, right? And I think it was something about, for what it's worth, she hasn't even finished the course. She's been through like a third of the course. And she posted in the group that she was worried about finding clients and she was worried about getting her business off the ground and maybe she just shouldn't do this
I
or what,
I
right?
saw that post and
That's
I
a
was
thinking trap, right?
yes, yes. 100%. And we'll talk about like four of the main kinds that generally will pop up in our minds.
So
And
tell me what are those? What are the four categories?
the first one is black and white thinking. So that's really when you kind of are like, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this. Right. Like, and a little bit that's what she was thinking, right? Like, I'll never be able to start this business. How could I do it? I'll never be able to. Look at all these people who have started these crazy businesses. And this is what she was saying. She was going on different websites and looking at how beautiful the websites were and how incredible. And she was just she was like, never going to be me. So a lot of times we come up with the thought, never going to be me, so I guess I'll just give up. And if her goal, though, is to start a business and a company, that's not a helpful thought. Another one is catastrophizing. This is going to be the worst day. Right. This podcast that I'm going to do with Jayne it's going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible. I'm so nervous. It's going to be awful. Right. It becomes like a
Spiral.
domino effect. Yeah. You can totally spiral into this catastrophizing world, right? A huge catastrophe is going to occur. It can be like really big, or it can just be that, it's going to be terrible. Basically, I think I can tell the future. The third kind would be labeling. So this is like, because of one thing, I'm now going to label myself or others in a negative way. I'll give you actually an example that I had this summer when I was creating this and when I saw your posts and when I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually something that would be great for the other people in our group. I couldn't figure out my own daughter's like sleep. It was like she was like 4-ish months. And I couldn't get it. We were at our vacation house and it was summer and I couldn't figure it out. I was a little sleep deprived and I couldn't get it together. And I reached out on our group. And as I pressed send, I was like, people are going to think I'm stupid. And I am an idiot. I'm an idiot. And I just decided like, I'm bad at this. How can I have a sleep consultant company? I'm bad at my own child. Right. Like that doesn't make sense at all. But thank God I know about this stuff. And I was like, well, let's take it a step back, and we'll talk a little bit more about like, how do you take it a step back and how do you reapproach these things? The last one is mind reading. This is when we assume what someone else is thinking, feeling, or deciding. And it's always, obviously, they're thinking terribly about us. Right. So in the example, I could have been like, they're just going to think I'm an idiot. Meanwhile, they maybe had like a million bajillion other thoughts because we have so many thoughts in a day. So those are the four main ones. We have black and white thinking, catastrophizing, labeling, and mind reading.
And so when people are stuck in these thinking traps, I want to really look at this through the lens of an entrepreneur because that's really what this podcast is all about. I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast, either they're already sleep consultants and I'm sure they can identify with a lot of what you just shared, or maybe they're thinking about becoming a sleep consultant and they're having all of these thoughts that like even before they've even gotten started, they're having all of these, you're calling them thinking traps. What comes to my mind is limiting beliefs, right? I think there's overlap there, right?
They kind of have different terms, different frameworks. In cognitive behavioral therapy, they're cognitive distortions, and DBT, they're thinking traps. There's like all different, but yeah.
Okay, there's a lot of ways to say the same thing. And I think that I always say that like you can either let your thoughts paralyze you or propel you, right? Your thoughts either stop you in your tracks and they ruin your plans, or you really like spring into action. So how do you get to the place where you're the type of person that can get yourself out of these thinking traps and really into a productive process where you can grow and thrive?
Yeah. First things first is you have to be able to identify them. And what I mean by that is being aware that you're stuck, that kind of like you moving, and then you just stop, right? Like personally for myself, after I did the course, I think I waited and waited and waited until I was like, okay, I'll help you, right? And clearly I had to get through some thoughts that I needed to stop. But if you can't be aware that there's an obstacle, then you're never going to get to the next part. So the first part is to just
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
I also think it's like there could be an obstacle, but it's not the obstacle that you think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Because like I have conversations with people every single day about, people are interested. Let's just use this as an example. Like people are interested in becoming sleep consultants. They have a talk with me, and their obstacle is that they don't know if they're going to be able to find any clients, right? Like I don't know, that's what they say.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the obstacle might actually be that they don't know who to have a conversation with, or they don't know where to be showing up, or that, right? Like the actual obstacle is not the one that's in their mind.
I might even go deeper to say they're just not confident in their ability to try something new, which is
right,
that's what
right.
this
So
is.
like right. So the obstacle is the lack of confidence, but they're disguising it as not knowing something that can be learned.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So the first is really to practice that like mindful muscle where we just kind of like notice things and put words to what we notice. And then from there, you can kind of see like, oh, I have this goal to get a business up and running, and I haven't done anything for it in 4 weeks. You need to recognize that you're not moving. And then you have to say, okay, what thoughts am I having right now? And I would even recommend, like, do you remember when we were in grade school and they'd be like, rewrite for 5 minutes, like before homeroom would start, and you'd have to just kind of like write anything you were thinking, like put your pen to the paper and don't lift it. I would really recommend doing that. Just all the thoughts that you have about the business, write them down, to see what comes out. No judgment. You're not allowed to judge your thoughts. You're not allowed to judge anything. This is a fact-finding operation, right? You're just writing what you're observing, what you're noticing coming up, and not judging it at all. Then you can notice, okay, do I have any traps here? Are there any thoughts that I'm thinking are fact? Because that's what actually happens. We believe that our thoughts are facts when really we can change our thoughts. You might notice you wrote never, or you might notice I wrote can't.
Can't is a good one.
Can't do it. What? Like, of course we can do it with some help, right? Worst, terrible. Those are our black and whites. And then are we telling the future, right? I'm not going to be able to find clients. How do you know? Do you have a crystal ball we've never seen before? Like that's just not a fact. That's a thought. Are you assuming something about someone else? Are you deciding something about yourself based off of one interaction, based off of, 17, based off of 100? Because I would really argue that even if it's based off of 100, right? Even if you failed 100 times, there was always a moment where you are learning. And so maybe the 101st time is going to be the time where you're going to be really impactful. So that's the notice part, right? We're going to stop, observe our thoughts, write them down, notice them. Do we have any traps going on? Any thoughts that we're deciding are facts? And now's the time where you do the hardest part, which is flip your mind. And there are some questions that you can ask yourself to help get there. The first, is it true for a fact that what you wrote is true? And if the answer is no, then you know that you need to move on to reframing. The other thing you can ask, how else could I look at this? Could there be another possibility? Could there be another explanation? And I don't want to discount the fact that, again, because we're really smart and our minds come to conclusions, sometimes there's validity in those conclusions. right? Let's say I really messed up with a parent interaction. Like really, I like totally bombed it. I was not in my right mind. I gave the wrong information, whatever it was. And I now say, wow, I was terrible. I I can't move forward. I can't recover from this. Maybe let's just say I was the worst in that moment.
In that moment. I love
Right.
that. In that
In
moment.
that moment, yeah, I was the worst. Right. I can't get clients. Maybe that's true right now. And I can think of steps to try to learn how to. So there are like I just don't want to discount the fact. I'm not saying that all of our thoughts are like egregiously wrong. It's just that we can look at them a little differently, right? We can use growth mindset language. Adding a yet at the end of things always is helpful.
Or an and, right? I always find the word and to be very helpful. Like
Yeah.
my business is feeling really hard and like I'm still working to figure it out or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or I had a slow month this
Slow
month.
month and next month may look different. Hopefully
Yep.
will. Yeah.
Yep. And the month before I was super busy. And, and there are new ways where I can create connections. There's so many, and that's like the biggest piece of like, what other possibilities could there be? How else, what other conclusions can I come to here? And it's not easy. It takes a lot of practice because it's easier to select for the negative than for the positive. There's more emotional connection to the negative than to the positive. So sometimes we have to really pull from that. I had a couple of like phrases that I kind of thought could be helpful. Like, I can't figure out this child. I'm not a good sleep consultant. Very common. I wouldn't say a common thought, but maybe it's a common experience, common interaction. Like, oh, this one was tricky, right? And I would say just that. Oh, this child is tricky, and I'm learning so much. Or this child is tricky and I'm realizing I need to beef up. I should go watch Jayne's video again, right? Like, so really taking the hardships and making them opportunities. So again, you're going to stop, notice that something's up, write down your thoughts, see where you can find any fallacies, any traps. You're going to validate yourself and others where you can. You're going to accept that you had this thought. It's no big deal. It makes sense. Right. And the reason why that acceptance and validation piece is so important is it because it limits our emotional connection to it. Because when we feel understood, there are different parts of our brain get activated. And our prefrontal cortex, where we really think more like consequentially and we think long term and we're able to learn and acquire new stuff, that gets more activated. And we're able to kind of say, okay, now that I feel understood and the other person feels understood, we can come up with different possibilities and different ways to look at this. And you might think about using and, you might think about using yet, you might think about reframing it that provides you an opportunity to come up with next steps. The last kind of tip is also to remember, what are you prioritizing right now? Are you prioritizing growing your business? Or are you prioritizing giving up? Are you prioritizing your business or are you prioritizing your reputation with this one person? Right? Like, yes, reputation is important. And if we get too stuck on a negative interaction, we're never going to get to the value of growing the business.
Yeah. I think there's just so much mindset work that goes into growing a successful business. And this is something that we actually train on inside of CPSM, but I think that
Yeah.
there's never enough learning on this. And really, if I can put sort of the people who are successful and the people who are less successful in two different buckets, from my view, I think a lot of it does boil down to mindset. I really do
100%.
believe that if you are capable of achieving something, you will. It might take you longer than projected, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
always tell people, like,
Mm-hmm.
if you think that you can do it, you will. It might
Yeah.
not happen on your projected timeline. It might take you longer than you anticipate. There may be ups and downs and swirls around, right? But if you believe that you're capable of figuring something out, you will figure it out. And if you decide today, tomorrow, next week, ever that you cannot do something, then like you're giving yourself an out to just stop working on it.
Right.
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 And that's it. That's the end. So many people
Right.
do that. And it's so finite. It's so definitive. Like you say, I can't do this, or this is too hard. And literally your brain believes you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the end. That's the end of the story. I see it all day. And, you know, really, if I look at our graduate pool of people who have completed the course, like people who believe in themselves are doing the thing, and people who don't are not. And it literally is that simple. And, you know, I think there's also like some people skills and some like, you know, committing to learning the material and gaining a master of your
Yeah.
craft, all of that stuff. But I really do think the number one thing is your mindset and your
Yeah.
beliefs. And, you know, I think that this plays in so similarly with our clients. When our clients show up, when parents show up and they say, I know my son can do this. I know he's capable. They will position themselves to be successful. They will position their child to be
Mm-hmm.
successful, and we will have a positive outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I have other parents tell me that their baby isn't ready. And, you know, this could be a 9-month-old baby that is totally ready.
The
Like,
baby said that he said he wasn't ready.
he said he wasn't ready. He told me he wasn't ready. You know, but like parents will say that to me.
Yeah.
Or even just like on those first discovery calls, I'm sure you hear this. I always write it down when parents say to me, you know, Elliot won't go to sleep without a parent sitting there, or Elliot can't fall asleep unless I'm scratching his back.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
those words are not true. And I always point that out to them. That's the very first thing I point out. I say, I just want to bring to your attention that you said a couple of things that just aren't true. And I know that you feel that they're true. They feel really true, but they're not. And I
Mm-hmm.
point them out. And every single time they say, you know, you're right. You're right. And I think a big part of the work that we do as sleep consultants is we help parents to reframe their own thoughts and to
Yeah.
shift into a more positive mindset. And, you know, I think that that's the value, hopefully, of the CPSM community with regard to all of us as entrepreneurs. It's like sometimes you need some help. Sometimes you need
Yeah.
somebody saying to you, your thoughts are not actually based in any
Right.
sort of reality,
Right.
which is
Right.
what I
Right.
had to say, which is what I had to say to that sweet person who was having trouble inside of our CPSM community. I
Yeah.
said to her this morning, I think we need to work on your mindset here, right? Like, this is just a mindset shift. That's all it is. Like,
Right.
you're saying things that are not true and you just think that they're true. And I get that, but let's work on that together.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. There's so much similarity between growing a business and growing a human.
Yes.
Because so much of ourselves are in both of them. You know, like,
Yes.
and so our emotions and our thoughts are so intermingled in those things. And I just want to say that oftentimes I notice with people that I work with, once I give them the vocabulary of the thought traps, then they're able to be like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. They almost feel more empowered because they know it's a thing. They totally get this. Okay. I think in black and white a lot.
Yeah.
I need
And
to.
that's the awareness piece that you were talking about. It's like first you have to admit that you have a problem, right? And first the first thing you do is you label it and you say, this is what I'm doing and I know that this is not working to my advantage and I'm working on changing that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the first step. As you said, just being aware of the fact that you are either saying things or thinking things that are not entirely based in truth and reality.
Yeah. And then also sometimes the bravery to like go against what your thought is. Like this summer when I was having trouble with my daughter, I wasn't sleeping. I was so emotionally invested in her case. I couldn't give myself space from it. So for me to be like, it's this time and I don't know, and I have to make the decision and I have to figure it out, and I really need a nap, but I can't nap because she's not. And it was so crazy that I was like, why am I not asking for help? I have so many people that could help me right now, and I'm not asking for help. That doesn't make any sense. And I finally just had to be like, they might think I'm bad at this, and I don't care because my priority is to get my child sleep. and then to get myself sleep, and then I can figure it out, you know?
Yeah, I think this is so helpful. I hope that for everybody listening, if you're trying to grow a successful business and you feel stuck, really, if everybody would just take a moment and reflect on your own thoughts and beliefs that are swirling around in your brain. And then, for the people who aren't necessarily struggling with their own thoughts, but are up against families who are having these really intrusive thoughts that are not productive to their own success. I think if we as sleep consultants can help our clients identify these thoughts and shift the perspective and help them to realize that, their baby can't sleep independently yet.
Right.
Or, they had a bad night last night and now we're going to make some changes and hopefully the next night's going to be better, is really, really valuable.
I wanted to just recommend to consultants when speaking with like parents, just some like language that I've found helpful are things like, do you mind if I restate that in a different way?
Ooh, okay.
Does that sound like a possibility? Right? Like when you were saying, it sounds like you're saying he can't sleep. Do you mind if I restate that? He has some trouble sleeping independently, and we want to help him learn. Is that right? Or is it possible that you're thinking X, Y, and Z? Do you mind if I go a little deeper? For some parents, it sounds like it's really painful for you to hear him cry. That makes total sense. It's our innate desire to help our children when they're in pain, which usually means crying. They're not in pain. They're frustrated. Right. Let's look at this different way. Is there another possibility? Those are all kind of taglines that are kind of helpful to see if the door is even open for you to give the help in reframing. And sometimes it also helps just a little bit of education for parents that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all connected. So if
Absolutely.
we can kind of like shift it, then everything else can come into place.
I appreciate that. Let us know where we can learn more from you.
Yeah. My website is empowernting.com, empower parenting together. And my Instagram handle is the same. I focus a lot on the step before. So on that mindfulness piece, that awareness piece, understanding how our own thoughts and feelings and behaviors impact our children's thoughts and feelings and behaviors. I found that there was so much information of like what to do, how to do, what to do when your kid's having a tantrum, give choices, do this, take 3 deep breaths. And I just felt like before you can even pull on what to do, you need to yourself, there's a lot of talk about being regulated. You need to be regulated, and being mindful is really the best way to keep yourself in check. So I start there and then grow bigger into what you can do to help your child.
Love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to educate all of us today. And we'll have to do it again soon. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Becoming a Sleep Consultant podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean so much to me if you would rate, review, and subscribe. When you rate, review, and subscribe, this helps the podcast reach a greater audience. I am so grateful for your support. If you would like to learn more about how you can become a certified sleep consultant, head over to my Facebook group, Becoming a Sleep Consultant, or to my website, thecpsm.com. Thanks so much, and I hope you will tune in for the next episode.